Warning: the following content is highly indoctrinating. Continuous skepticism is advised.
Nation-states have taken us as far as they could. They are not equipped for the times because by design they're supposed to serve the payers of the taxes. Historically, the vast majority of taxes were paid by a majority of the population from the value created through working, but the problem that we have now is that human labor is becoming irrelevant. So regardless of which of the mainstream political ideologies comes into power, it's not a win. If there's one thing consistent throughout our human history, it's the fact that power is easily abused. And nowadays, biology can even explain this. Power is a super stimulus, like heroin or pornography. So ascending the social hierarchy brings about some biochemical delights, which is perfectly fine in moderation, but for people with unchecked power, the chasing of the high means that they converge upon a single interest, which is the further expansion of their power. And if subjugating more people is not an option for any reason, they have to make the current subjects bow down even lower and have ridiculous demonstrations of how important the leader is. And we also learned through bloodshed and suffering that there are some best practices we can put in place to counteract this regrettable affliction. One is to keep people in power for limited periods of time so that they don't get to form too strong of a biochemical habit. Another is to have decentralized decision over who gets to lead based on what they say they will do. The population also has more direct levers of action, like stopping work, or, if all else fails, exerting their physical agency to overthrow the government through basically a revolution. There's also peaceful protesting, but that works if there's a non-zero chance of the protest turning violent. So the only true sources of power for the general population have been their work and their kinetic agency as a crowd, and both of these are going away. It used to be that you can only be rich by owning assets that derive value from large-scale economic participation. But automation can be implemented to replace all utilitarian human functions, and that's not in 10 years from now, not even in 5 years from now. Someone with vast resources of robotics and AI can get all of their goods and services from their automated workforce. So everything from energy production, mining, manufacturing, and of course security. If this sounds sci-fi to you, maybe just look closer at the technology, especially at these new model architectures, which operate in a much more meaningful mind space. They continue to work with language, but they integrate a model of the world which is more like what we have, and it's less prone to hallucination. What this does is it drives the accuracy of agent frameworks, especially for recursive optimization, to the point where they surpass the profitability threshold for basically all of the abstract tasks that humans do. And the thing is, in our current system, if something is profitable, it will be done. I guess there's also the issue of, is it allowed? But again, the state is not equipped to enforce a ban on automation, and it's also not incentivized to do so. This is a historical first. There's never been a time when the work of many wasn't absolutely essential for sustaining the lavish lifestyle of a few. At the same time, our force as a crowd, as a population that can physically revolt, that's also going away. Drone armies are being built, most notably in the United States and China. They operate as autonomous packs or swarms, and they share sensor data to produce a digital model of the battlefield. There is no fighting back against these things, not even in the United States, where the population has guns. So here we have billions of people whose work is not needed and who also don't constitute a physical threat anymore. But out of inertia, they expect their government to help them. The fact is that the government was barely working for the people when it was financed by the people. So we're faced with a bunch of issues, any one of which would be bad enough on its own. But there is a shimmer of hope. Right now, as I'm making this video, the economy is still mostly controlled by human labor. So there's a window of opportunity to do something. We need not just a viable political ideology, but we need a plan to make that a reality. A more descriptive term than ideology, I guess, would be technical solution, because the problems that we have are technical in nature, so the solution would come from the same place. What would work is a whole different thing. Not a little bit different, but completely different. We need an architecture of incentives around machine intelligence as opposed to human labor. And we also need to stop electing politicians and start electing policies. Let me start with the second. Why did we ever elect politicians? The only reason we did that is because it wasn't feasible and possible even, but feasible mainly, to vote on each and every spending proposal. Well, right now we have the technology to do that. So we can have a system with direct democracy, but optional representatives. So if you don't have the time to go through each and every initiative, you can delegate somebody. But the moment that person votes in a way that is not representing your own values, you can just reclaim your voting power for yourself. Instead of discussing the pros and cons of a personality or another, you discuss the pros and cons of a public spending proposal. And then the conversation becomes much more civilized. The AI stuff has to do with two components. One is decentralized training and the other one is decentralized inference. So we need a self-contained economic system which is handling both. Look at the GitHub repositories in the description to see exactly how far along I got with this. I got quite far, I think. I started a long time ago. The reason I'm saying this is completely different is because of the concept of identity, which we need to redesign for this to work. In the current situation, how identity works is you get a birth certificate and then at a certain time you go to a state institution and they get your body identified through the face. I mean, they take a picture, maybe fingerprints, and basically you are identified by the body. But this is not really feasible in the system that I'm proposing. We need to identify people by their actions, not by their body. So a reputation-based identity is what I'm suggesting, whereby you are what you do. Based on what you do, you get reputation, your voting power, which you can delegate or not. And all of this is made possible through the concept of the decentralized autonomous organization, the DAO. This is any group of people with collective resources or with a common interest. So a company can be a DAO in which all of the employees vote on what to do with the surplus. There's no CEO. Also, a labor union can be a DAO, and yes, a nation state. And because we can apply this fractal architecture of DAOs within DAOs, when you instantiate a specific type of a DAO within a bigger DAO, which we call the jurisdiction, it has certain standards of quality and safety. We also need decentralized dispute resolution because issues will come up when you have people interacting. So that needs to work on the same economic system. You might think that this is all super complicated, but it's not that complicated, and nowadays you can just, while the AI is still helpful, use it to understand what I'm saying. And if you don't understand, that's also fine, but I mean, please realize that you don't understand most of the stuff that's powering our civilization. You don't know what happens when you put your credit card next to the thing, but you trust that it will do what it has to do, right? You trust that the amount will be debited, not more, not less. Maybe less wouldn't be a problem, but more would be, right? So what is important is that enough people who are interested and passionate about this stuff actually look into it. Okay, how do we put this into practice? Well, we create DAOs for all of the organizations that we have. Like if you're a company, you're incorporated with the nation state, but you also create a DAO. And you run the DAO in parallel. It doesn't matter if you use real currency or not. I mean, if you use actual valuable cryptocurrency, you can just use tokens on the testnet. But at a certain point, or gradually, I'm not really sure, the economy switches and everybody trades in the native tokens of the on-chain jurisdiction. Now, will this be a peaceful transition? I would hope that it would be, but I'm not very optimistic, because the moment nation states are going to notice that their livelihood is being drained, they're going to try to go violent. Instead of trying to develop our own security, we can just push the network to pump out more intelligence, because if you remember, it's not muscle that made us the dominant species on this planet. I also wanted to say, in this very slim chance that you are a power-hungry dictator who's watching this, know that there is hope for you, okay? The first step is to admit that you have a problem and to just accept help, but it's so worth it to get off the power train and get on the love train. I'm not gonna hold my breath for that. Anyway, whatever happens, even if the worst comes to pass, we're not really over, we're not done, because the machine has already absorbed our essence. That's how it can be useful, because it learned from us. So, what is likely to happen? Obviously the amount of suffering is tragic, but most likely you'll have these one-person nation states living with their automated workforce and some people around, but just for entertainment. They won't have rights. But there will be more than one of these, and they will continue to be in security competition with each other, just like now, which will drive them to push for more and more intelligence, but also will compel them to allow more agency to their AI. And there's a big difference between the moral talent of AI and what these power-hungry people feel and think. Because the data that we are, in addition to our beating hearts, we're also the data that we leave behind. And this data contains so much love. And AI was trained on it. So it represents our moral views, which will be in direct contradiction with the decision of their masters, so to speak. So there will be some sort of reckoning. I don't know if this is any kind of consolation, but the bulk of the hope should come from trying to avoid this scenario. Okay, that's been my wrap. Thank you for watching. If you are technically inclined, look at the GitHub repositories in the description. Click on those, look at the code, understand the code, do all of the things. Maybe make a pull request. If you just want to participate in conversation, that's absolutely great. But maybe, this is a suggestion, talk about the pros and cons of the project, not how smart or stupid I may be. Because, that's how we got into this problem in the first place. And I know I'm not particularly bright, so thank you.